sixth graders and those of you who have decided to join us for reading time. Today we are going to start reading one of my favorite books, Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. While we are reading, there are thinking journal pages on Connected Planet that you may upload for free and fill out because they help us think like scientists. And I would highly encourage you to do this. There are questions in there. There are places for you to draw pictures of what's happening and write summaries about what you remember from the book. Also, thinking journal pages kind of become little parking lots where we can put down our thoughts or questions that might come up and help us find a way to maybe do a little research afterwards and find out some answers to the questions that we had. Okay, so feel free to follow along in your book. Just listen, sit and color a picture, or fill out thinking journal pages as we read Island of the Blue Dolphins. I will need my reading glasses, so sorry about that. Here we go. Chapter 1. I remember the day the aloud ship came to our island. At first it seemed like a small shell afloat on the sea. Then it grew larger and larger and was a gull with folded wings. At last, in the rising sun, it became what it really was, a red ship with two red sails. My brother and I had gone to the head of the canyon that winds blow down to the little harbor, which is called Coral Cove. We had gone to gather roots that grow there in the spring. My brother Ramo was only a little boy half my age, which was 12. He was small for one who lived so many suns and moons, but quick as a cricket, also foolish as a cricket when he was excited. For this reason, and because I wanted him to help me gather roots and not go running off, I said nothing about the shell I saw or the gull with folded wings. I went on digging in the brush with my pointed stick as though nothing at all were happening at sea, even when I knew for sure that the gull was a ship with two red sails. But Ramo's eyes missed little in the world. They were black like a lizard's and very large, and like the eyes of a lizard, he could sometimes look sleepy. This was the time when they saw the most. This was the way they looked now. They were half closed, like those of a lizard lying on a rock about to flick out its tongue to catch a fly. "The sea is so smooth," Ramo said. "It's a flat stone without any scratches." My little brother liked to pretend that one thing was another. "The sea is not a stone without scratches," I said. "It's water with no waves." "To me, it's a blue stone," he said, "and far away on the edge of a small cloud which sits on the stone. Clouds don't sit on stones, on blue ones or black ones or any kind of stones." "This one does." "Not in the sea," I said. "Dolphins sit there, and gulls, and cormorants, and otter, and whales too, but not clouds." "It is a whale, maybe?" Ramos was standing on one foot and then another, watching the ship coming, which he did not know was a ship, because he had never seen one. I had never seen one either, but I knew how they looked because I had been told. "While you gaze at the sea," I said, "I dig roots, and it's I who will eat them, and you who will not." Ramo began to punch the earth with his stick, but as the ship came closer, its sails showing red through the morning mist, he kept watching it, acting all the time as if he were not. "Have you ever seen a red whale?" he asked. "Yes," I said, though I never had. "Those I have seen are gray," he said. "You're very young and have not seen everything that swims in the world." Ramo picked up a root and was about to drop it into the basket. Suddenly his mouth opened wide and then closed again. "A canoe!" he cried. "A great one, bigger than all of our canoes together, and red." A canoe or a ship, it did not matter to Ramo. In the very next breath he tossed the root into the air and was gone, crashing through the brush, shouting as he went. I kept on gathering roots, but my hands trembled as I dug in the earth, for I was more excited than my brother. I knew there was a ship there on the sea and not a big canoe, and a ship could mean many things. I wanted to drop the stick and run too, but I went on digging roots because they were needed in the village. By the time I filled the basket, the aloud ship had sailed around the wide kelp bay that encloses our island and between our two rocks that guard Coral Cove. Word of its coming had already reached the village of Galasat. Carrying their weapons, our men sped along the trail, which winds down to the shore. Our women were gathering at the edge of the mesa. I made my way through the heavy brush now, moving swiftly down the ravine until I came to the sea cliffs. There I crouched on my knees and hands. Below me lay the cove. The tide was out and the sun shone on the white sand of the beach. Half of the men from our village stood at the water's edge. The rest were concealed among the rocks at the foot of the trail, ready to attack the intruders should they prove unfriendly. As I crouched there in the tanyan bushes, trying not to fall over the cliff, trying to keep myself hidden and yet to see and hear what went on below, a boat left the ship. 6 men with long oars were rowing. Their faces were broad and shining hair, dark hair fell over their eyes. When they came closer, I saw that they had bone ornaments thrust through their noses. Behind them in the boat stood a tall man with a yellow beard. I had never seen a Russian before, but my father had told me about them, and I wondered, seeing the way he stood with his feet set apart and his fists on his hips, and looked at the little harbor as though it already belonged to him, if he were one of those men from the north whom our people feared. I was certain of it when the boat slid into the shore and he jumped out, shouting as he did so. His voice echoed against the rock walls of the cove. The words were strange, unlike any I'd ever heard. Slowly then, he spoke in our tongue. "I come in peace and wish to parley," he said to the men on the shore. None of them answered, but my father, who was one of those hidden among the rocks, came forward down the sloping beach. He thrust his spear in the sand. "I am the chief of Galasat," he said. "My name is Chief Choweg." I was surprised that he gave his real name to a stranger. Everyone in our tribe has 2 names. The real one, which was secret and was seldom used, and the one which is common, for if people use your secret name, it becomes worn out and loses its magic. Thus, I was known as Wanapale, which means girl with long black hair, though my secret name is Karana. My father's secret name is Choweg. Why did he give it to a stranger? I did not know. The Russian smiled and held up his hand, calling himself Captain Orlov. My father also held up his hand. I could not see his face, but I doubted that he smiled in return. "I have come with 40 of my men," the Russian said. "We come to hunt sea otter. We wish to camp on your island while we are hunting." My father said nothing. He was a tall man, though not so tall as Captain Orlov, and he stood with his bare shoulders thrown back, thinking about what the Russian had said. He was in no hurry to reply, because the Aleuts had come before to hunt otter. That was long in the past, but my father still remembered them. "You remember another hunt?" Captain Orlov said when my father was silent. "I have heard of it too. It was led by Captain Metrif, who was a fool and is now dead. The trouble arose because you and your tribe did all of the hunting." "We hunted," said my father, "but the one you call a fool wished us to hunt from one moon to the next, never ceasing." "This time you will do nothing," Captain Orlov said. "My men will hunt and we will divide the catch. 1 part for you to be paid in goods and 2 parts for us." "The parts must be equal," my father said. Captain Orlov gazed off toward the sea. "We can talk of that later when my supplies are safe ashore," he replied. This morning was fair with little wind, yet it was the season of the year when storms could be looked for, so I understood why the Russian wished to move on to our island. "It's better to agree now," my father said. Captain Orlov took 2 long steps away from my father, then turned to face him. 1 part to you is fair, since the work is ours, and ours is the risk." My father shook his head. The Russian grasped his beard. "Since the sea is not yours, why do I have to give you any part?" "The sea which surrounds the island of the Blue Dolphins belongs to us," answered my father. He spoke softly, as he did when he was angry. "From here the coast of Santa Barbara, 20 leagues away. Not only that which touches the island and where the otter live." Captain Orlov made a sound in his throat. He looked at our men standing on the beach and toward those who had come from behind the rocks. He looked at my father and shrugged his shoulders. Suddenly he smiled, showing long teeth. "The parts shall be equal," he said. He said more, but I did not hear it, for at that instant, in my great excitement, I moved a small rock, which clattered down the cliff and fell at his feet. Everyone on the beach looked up. Silently, I left the tanyan bushes and ran without stopping until I reached the mesa. So what I would like for you to think about in the first chapter is her secret name and why the people of this village have a secret name and a common name. Because as we are reading the book, sometimes we'll hear her talk about her name Karana, which is her secret personal name, and then her other name, Wanapale, which is her common name, and people would call her that. Okay, so as you're writing in your thinking journals, write whatever's interesting to you about secret names. And if you could have a secret name, what would your secret name be? And why would you choose that secret name? Okay, we're going to read chapter 2. Chapter 2. Captain Orlov and his aloud hunters moved to the island that morning, making trips from their ship to the beach of Coral Cove. Since the beach was small and almost flooded when the tide was in, he asked if he could camp on higher ground. This my father agreed to. "Perhaps I should tell you about our island so you will know how it looks and where our village was and where the Aleuts camped for most of the summer. Our island is 2 leagues long and 1 league wide, and if you were standing on one of the hills that rise in the middle of it, you would think it looked like a fish. Like a dolphin lying on its side with its tail pointing toward the sunrise, its nose pointing to the sunset, and its fins making reefs and rocky ledges along the shore. Whether someone did stand there on the low hill in the days when the earth was new, and because of its shape called it the island of the Blue Dolphin, I don't know. My dolphins live in other seas, in our seas, and maybe from them that name came. But one way or another, that is what the island is called. The first thing you will notice about our island, I think, is the wind. It blows almost every day, sometimes from the northwest and sometimes from the east, once in a long while out of the south. And because of them, the hills are polished smooth, and the trees are small and twisted, and even in the canyon that runs down to Coral Cove. The village of Galasat lay east of the hills in the small mesa, near Coral Cove and a good spring. About a half a league to the north is another spring, and it was there that the Aleuts put up their tents, which were made of skins and were so low to the earth that men had to crawl into them on their stomachs. At dusk, we could see the glow of their fires. That night, my father warned everyone in the village of Galasat against visiting the camp. "The Aleuts come from a country far to the north," he said. "Their ways are not ours, nor is their language. They have come to take otter and to give us our share in many goods which they have come and which we can use. In this way we shall profit. But we shall not profit if we try to befriend them. They are people who do not understand friendship. They are not those who were here before, but they are people of the same tribe and caused trouble many years ago." My father's words were obeyed. We did not go to the Aleut camp and they did not come to our village. But this is not to say that we did not know what they did, what they ate, and in what way they cooked, how many otter were killed each day, and other things as well, for someone was always watching from the cliffs while they were hunting, or from the ravine when they were in camp. Ramo, for instance, brought news about Captain Orlov. "In the morning, when he crawls out of his tent, he sits on a rock and combs his beard until it shines, like a cormorant's wings," Ramo said. My sister Ulape, who was 2 years older than I, gathered the most curious news of all. She swore there was an aloud girl among the hunters. She's dressed in skin just like the men, Ulape said, but she wears a fur cap, and under the cap she has thick hair that falls to her waist. No one believed Ulape. Everyone laughed at the idea that the hunters would bother to bring their wives with them. The Alouds also watched our village, otherwise they would not have known about the good fortune which befell us soon after they came. It happened in this way. Early spring is a poor season for fishing. The heavy seas and winds of the winter drive the fish into deep water, where they stay until the weather is settled and where they are hard to catch. During this time, the village eats sparingly, mostly from the stores of seeds harvested in the autumn. Word of our good fortune came on a stormy afternoon, brought by Ulape, who was never idle. She had gone to the ledge in the eastern part of the island, hoping to gather shellfish. She was climbing a cliff on the way home when she heard a loud noise behind her. At first she did not see what caused the noise. She thought it was the wind echoing through one of the caves and was about to leave when she noticed silvery shapes on the floor of the cave. The shapes moved, and she saw that it was a school of large white bass, each one as big as she was. Pursued by killer whales, which prey upon them when seals are not found, the bass tried to escape by swimming toward the shore. But in their terror they had mistaken the depth of the water and had been tossed onto the rocky ledge. Ulape dropped her basket of shellfish and set out for the village, arriving there so out of breath that she could only point in the direction of the shore. The women were cooking supper, but all of them stopped and gathered around her, waiting for her to speak. "A school of white bass," she finally said. Where?" everyone asked. "On the rocks. A dozen of them, perhaps more than a dozen." Before Ulape had finished speaking, we were running toward the shore, hoping that we would get there in time, that the fish had not flopped back into the sea, or that a chance wave had not washed them away. We came to the cliff and looked down. The school of white bass was still on the ledge, glistening in the sun. But since the tide was high and the biggest waves were already lapping at the fish, there was no time to lose. One by one, we hauled them out of the reach of the tide. Then two women carrying a single fish, for they were all of about the same size and heavy, we lifted them up the cliff and brought them home. There was enough for everyone in our tribe for supper that night and the next. But in the morning, two Alouds came to the village and asked to speak to my father. "You have fish," one of them said. "Enough only for my people," my father answered. "You have 14 fish," the Aloud said. "7 now, because we ate 7, my father replied. "From 7 you can spare 2. "There are 40 in your camp," my father replied, "and more than that of us. Besides, you have your own fish, the dried ones you brought." "We tire of our kind," the Aloud said. He was a short man who only came to my father's shoulders and had small eyes like black pebbles and a mouth like the edge of a stone knife. The other Aloud looked very much like him. "You are hunters," my father said. "Go and hunt your own fish if you are tired of what you're eating now. I have my people to think of." "Captain Orlo will hear of this if you refuse to share the fish." "Yes, tell him," my father said. "But also why we refuse." The Aloud grunted to his companion, and the two of them stalked off on their short legs across the sand dunes that lay between the village and their camp. We ate the rest of the white bass that night, and there was much rejoicing. But little did we know, as we ate and sang, and the older men told stories about the fire, that our good fortune would soon bring trouble to Galasat. That is where we are going to stop for today. So what I'd like for you to do in your thinking journals, if you are writing them down, and if you are not, just think about it. What do you think will happen next? Because the author is giving us a little bit of foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is kind of telling a little bit of something that might happen next, and we're not sure what it is, but we know it's something because they end with, we didn't know what would happen next. Okay? So I will see you next time. Have a great day and enjoy writing. See you soon.